John, I had a chance to review the lesson plan for the observation. Looks like this lesson will be focused on multiplying decimals. I see that you've used your pre-unit assessments to think about some heterogeneous groups for this lesson, and that you have some questions planned in advance.
Yeah.
So John, in thinking about this lesson, what are some strategies that you'll use to engage all students in the learning?
Well, all students will be engaged when we do the partner work part of the lesson. And also with the open-ended questioning that I'll use, I'll make sure that all students are included in answering those. Mm-hmm. I do also have to consider that there's some kids that may not have the foundational skills for this lesson of multiplying decimals. So one of the ways that I address that is doing a warm-up every day to help build those skills.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you're thinking about strategies for engagement, like the partner work, but also about the readiness skills that kids need to be successful. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So John, what might it look like and sound like at the end of the lesson if students really got it?
Well, they'd be able to multiply decimals and show me that, but not show me in an algorithm that they can work an algorithm, but that they can use the manipulatives, which are the cubes and the longs and the flats that we use, and then from that do a drawing and then write the equation.
Okay, so using manipulatives to solve the problem. So in thinking about the sorts of problems that you'll ask students to solve, what's an example of one?
Like 5 times 0.1.
So the focus is on multiplying a whole number by a decimal number?
Correct.
So in thinking about the example that you gave me, what would be an example of a correct response?
Well, they should be able to accurately show the drawing part of it, and then also the equation, and that they would both be correct.
Okay, so it sounds like accuracy is important as well as being able to show some sort of picture representation and an equation, so 3 things.
Yeah, and I think it's important that at the beginning of the lesson that I make it clear that those are the 3 things that I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. Now that as I've kind of talked this out, I see the importance of that.
Mm-hmm. So you're thinking about really being transparent about expectations with students.
Yeah.
So in that same spirit of transparency and being really explicit about what it is that we're hoping for with students, let's think for a moment about the outcome for this lesson and creating a mastery outcome. When we create a mastery outcome, there are really 2 things to consider. 1, it should describe what students should know and be able to do, and 2nd, it should be measurable.
Okay.
So you've already talked a little bit about what students should know and be able to do.
Right, so it would be written kind of as, I will understand how to multiply decimals by whole numbers.
Mm-hmm. And use the term understand. What might be a different verb that you could use that maybe is measurable, or a behavior that you could observe?
I will be able to show an equation, or that I can multiply decimals by whole numbers.
Right, show or represent. Mm-hmm. So let's take out a piece of paper and practice writing that outcome that you'll share with students tomorrow.
So I will be able to represent multiplying decimals by whole numbers in a picture and equation.
Earlier you mentioned accuracy. How can we include that here?
I will be able to accurately represent multiplying decimals by whole numbers in a picture and equation.
Mm-hmm. So you now have a mastery outcome, so it describes what students should know and be able to do, and it's measurable.
Okay, I get that. And I see now that I'm going to have to work on revising the way I write my student outcomes in my lesson planning to more capture this idea of mastery learning. So that'll be something I'll have to work on.
Good. So you're thinking about transfer to other lessons.
Yeah.
So John, as you think about the conversation today, what might be some of your next steps?
Well, I need to I need to revise my exit slip to change the way it's written to better represent the mastery learning. And now that I think about it, I'm going to have to also revise my lesson plan as how I introduce this topic so that it's really clear to the students that these are the things that I'm looking for, that they can do the picture representation, the equation, and that they're both accurate.
So alignment of your assessment and the outcome, and also the presentation are things that you're thinking about.
Yeah.
Okay. So John, before we wrap up, in terms of the observation, is there anything in particular you'd like me to be looking for?
Well, you know, we've been talking a lot about the component 3D assessment, and one thing that I would want is, you know, I'm trying to use a lot of different strategies to figure out whether kids are getting it, and so if you could kind of watch and give me feedback on that, that'd be great. Great,
yes. 3D is your goal area, so absolutely I'll be looking specifically for some assessment strategies and how that's going.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. We're looking forward to seeing you at second period. So John, I enjoyed the observation in your classroom today. Before we get started on the conference, I want to take a few moments and frame the purpose of the conference. Really, the purpose of the conference is learning for both of us. For me, learning how I can support you in elevating your practice. And for you, what I'm hoping is that you'll come away with a few strategies that you can apply to many lessons in the future.
Okay.
So in terms of our agenda, here's how today will sort of go. We'll start out by reflecting on the lesson, and then we'll move into looking at your self-assessment and talking about ratings, and then we'll talk about some next steps.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, so in thinking about your lesson, what are some things that come to mind as you reflect?
Well, the kids got busy right away. They had got their materials out. There wasn't much wasted time at the beginning of the period, so I thought that went well. I've been working, you know, along with this work on 3D on strategies for assessment. So those colored cards with the red and green and yellows, I thought that went well, and that they were honest about them. So when there was the word conjecture came up and we were going through vocabulary and they were flashing the cards, several of them showed yellow, that they didn't understand it, and that showed me that we're starting to build trust in the classroom and they're willing to take risks. So I was happy to see that. Let's see. Oh, and also near the end of the period, we got to talk about some real-world applications for multiplying decimals. So I'd say those were the big successes.
Great. So there are a number of things that you found really satisfying about the lesson. What were some things that were maybe concerns that you had?
Well, the biggie was that we didn't get through the lesson. You know, all the reflection that I planned at the end of the period and doing the exit slip, all of that we didn't even get to because we didn't even start the new learning until about halfway through the period. So.
So you're thinking about the pacing?
Yeah.
So in thinking about the warm-up, what are some of the reasons for starting out the class with the warm-up?
Well, the main thing is it's just a great way to start class from a management standpoint. Kids have, you can get them directed right away. They can, I can take roll, I can collect homework, I can make connections with students, I can do those kind of things if the kids are busy on something right away at the beginning of the class. So I think that's been a good strategy. The other part of it, as we talked about yesterday, was I have kids that need some foundational work, and that reinforcement every day has been really good too.
So two purposes, management and also opportunity for review.
Yeah.
So looking back at the notes, what time did the warm-up start and stop?
Well, it looks like the period started at 8:30. They started the warm-up at 8:35. And we started writing, the first part of the new learning was the I can statements, and that was at about 9 o'clock. So that was about halfway through the period.
So it looks as if it was about 30 minutes before the new learning started, according to the notes.
Yeah.
So what might be some strategies to modify the warm-up to fit within, say, a 5 to 10 minute time frame?
Well, one thing I could do to cut down is I had the questions up on the board, but I didn't have the grids and the charts. And so I had to go up and add those, and the kids had to wait for me. And so making sure that everything is up on the board right away would be one way I could cut down on the time. And I guess I could cut down from 3 questions down to 1 or 2. That would cut some time also.
So 2 strategies would be having the warm-up prepared in its fullest in advance, and then reducing the number of prompts. Another strategy could be to teach the students the routine of getting started on the warm-up without you having to introduce the warm-up to them. So as soon as they come in, get their materials and go ahead and get started right away. And then that frees you up to take attendance. Because one of the things that we talked about, reasons why we do the warm-up is so that you can take care of some business.
Yeah, I can work on that.
So let's take out a piece of paper and think about your warm-up for tomorrow. So I'm thinking about your outcome. What warm-up might make sense?
Well, we could pick it up from where we left off today, which was do 2.2 times 0.5. And that was the example that we left off on. So I could start with that, and that could be, have them work that, and that could be the warm-up. Yeah, I think I could try that.
All right.
But one of the things that's a little bit of a problem with that is, I want everyone to stay busy at the beginning so that I can do attendance and all those things. And so the reason I usually give them multiple problems is so if they finish early, they don't all have to get them all done. But for those kids that are quicker, that gives them something to go on to. So I'm not sure what to do about that.
So to keep all kids engaged during this time, what might be a way that you could say extend that one warm-up question and go a little bit deeper with that same question?
Well, I could have them represent the drawing in different ways.
Okay.
Because we've done some practicing of that, how they represent it vertically and horizontally. So I could have them do some different representations. I could maybe have them write a story problem out with the decimals. For the kids that get done quicker are the kind of kids that normally would be able to handle that. Those would be a couple things I could try.
All right. And what I'm noticing is that with the addition of some of those extension ideas, that the level of thinking required is actually much more complex. So there are a couple of higher level thinking skills that would be required with some of those additional steps. So let's go ahead and write those down so that you'll be ready for tomorrow. So John, let's transition now and talk a little bit about the self-assessment and the ratings.
Okay.
So one of the things I noticed that you added was an additional couple pieces of evidence to 3E, flexibility and responsiveness, and I just wanted to spend just a little bit of time clarifying that. So first, it's really helpful for you to add evidence, especially for that component, because one thing that's really difficult for me as an observer around that component is knowing which sorts of decisions were planned in advance and really intentional, and what sorts of things you sort of decided to do on the fly based on what you saw your students doing and saying in class. So what were some of your thinking and behind the jumping in and sort of stopping students during independent work and bringing everyone back together?
Well, one of the pieces of evidence that I added was at that point where when I was going around to groups, it was clear that one of the groups was completely off. And the reason they were off was because they hadn't labeled their work. And so that gave a good opportunity for me to just stop everybody and go back and remind them of the importance, not just that group, but everybody, the importance of labeling their work.
So that was a time maybe to clarify.
Yeah.
For kids around an expectation. Great, so that helps a lot, thank you. So let's move in now and talk about some of the places where we agreed and disagreed in terms of rating. First of all, I want to begin by talking about 3D. 3D assessment was something that you selected as a goal area at the front end of the year, and something that I know you've been working on really intentionally. And I just wanted to say that during this lesson that I observed a number of formative assessment strategies integrated throughout our time together. I noticed that students were using whiteboards, students had an opportunity to share a response with a peer and get some feedback. Your feedback to students was really precise and intentional. You're asking students some prompts to get them thinking. And I noticed that at times, based on students' responses on some of their feedback, for instance, on the self-assessment with your colored cards, you stopped and clarified the meaning, say, around, I think, that term conjecture. Mm-hmm. So some really great strategies. So you rated yourself distinguished, and I agreed with that rating.
Thank you.
So let's move on now and talk about 3A. So looking at the rubric, what are some of the differences between the basic level of performance and proficient for 3A?
Well, when I look at the difference between basic and proficient on this, a couple things jump out. One is that the teacher's explanation is very clear, it's very accurate, that the vocabulary is very appropriate. And the second big difference is this idea that the teacher invites student intellectual engagement. Mm-hmm. So those two I see as the biggest difference. Mm-hmm.
So directions are clear, there's some precise language, students participate in explanation of the content. So let's take a look at the evidence for this component.
Okay. Well, I do see in the notes that students asked 3 times, what are we supposed to do, one small group of students. Mm-hmm. So clearly I didn't give very accurate directions or precise directions during that part. Mm-hmm. And this where a student says, I don't understand what you meant by round numbers. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, if I would have used the word whole numbers, I might have avoided that misconception. Mm-hmm. So I guess when I look at this and I look at the rubric, I think basic is probably a more accurate mm-hmm. rating for that.
Mm-hmm. So basic for 3A then?
Yeah.
So John, let's take a look now at 3C. The rating that you selected was proficient. And there was some evidence that was clearly proficient, and there was also some evidence that was basic. So let's go back into the rubric and look at the language. So I just want to read this excerpt. The lesson has a clearly defined structure, and the pacing of the lesson is appropriate, providing most students the time that they need to be intellectually engaged. So thinking back to the lesson, what's your hunch about the degree to which most students were intellectually engaged throughout the lesson?
Well, if we look at the second half of the lesson, which was the new learning on multiplying decimals, I think the majority of the class was intellectually engaged with the partner activity and the questions that I was asking. But I think it goes back to the issue with the pacing and the entry activity, that during that time, there was a smaller group of kids who need that work on fundamental skills that were intellectually engaged, but for the others it was more building automaticity, reviewing, and they were probably didn't rise to that level of intellectual engagement. Mm-hmm. So it goes back again to the pacing issue.
Mm-hmm. So based on the evidence around the structure of the lesson, getting stuck sort of in the warm-up for about 30 minutes, not being able to get to the latter half of the lesson with the reflection and the closure and the exit ticket. And then also thinking about, the amount of engagement for, all but 3 or 4 kids that are struggling. The level for this lesson probably falls more solidly in the basic rating.
Yeah, I can see that.
So I think that we were in agreement with the other components in domains 1 and 2. But before we wrap up, I really want to spend a little bit of time really thinking about a few areas of growth that I've noticed over this year. In particular, I noticed around 3B, questioning and discussion, that you have spent some good time thinking about how to challenge all students to answer higher level questions. I see you using techniques that ensure that all students are accountable for participating in discussion. You use cold calling, you use popsicle sticks to call on students randomly, you have students intentionally partnered with AV partnerships, you have students paraphrase what their partner has said. So there's a number of strategies that I'm seeing at this point in the year.
Thanks, I'm feeling a lot better about that, yeah.
Great, great. So John, in thinking about today's conversation, what are some of your takeaways?
Well, the big one is I'm going to work on those, the revisions to my warm-up, to streamline my warm-up. So I'm going to have my students practice coming in and getting started on it right away. I'm going to keep it focused down to 1 with maybe some extensions, and see if I can really cut down the time and make sure that everything is on the board and prepared so that there's no delays in that. So that's one of them. And the other one is going to be working on my precise language so that make sure that everybody understands the directions and what's expected of them. So I would say those are my 2 areas to focus on.
All right. So John, what would be a good time for me to come back to your class to observe these strategies in practice?
Well, I'm going to need a little time to do the routine of coming in and getting started on the warm-up and get them ready for that. Maybe next week, like Tuesday of next week. Will that work?
And second period again?
Sure.
Great. We'll see you Tuesday.